Only 3 stops left on the Bassmaster Elite Series. Easton Fothergill catches an 8-12 in a Bassmaster Open, and will Spotted Bass exclusively win the Bassmaster Elite this week? That and more on episode 181 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Ronnie Moore. My co-host, like always, Kyle Jessie in Birmingham. And Kyle, not too far from home this week for the next stop of the Bassmaster Elite Series, the 8th stop, Smith Lake, Cullman, Alabama. Uh, Deep, clear, heavy boat traffic, midsummer, spotted bass. It should be a tough one, tricky one, a little bit of mystery involved, as well as this is the first time the Elite Series has ever been to Smith.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely going to make for an interesting tournament. I mean, I think we've heard collectively a lot of negativity around this tournament, just based on what you said, the boat traffic and the things that will be a factor. And it's not like something that's going to sneak up and surprise anybody. I think you kind of expect that at Smith like any time when it's not the winter time. But for me, I might have a different perspective altogether by the end of the fourth day being out there on the water. But like for me, looking at this tournament objectively, like there are a lot of things to consider that potentially could make it a really, really interesting tournament. I mean, there's no lack of bass in Smith Lake, and I mean, our guys are going to catch them. Like they're going to find a way to catch them. It's just a matter of catching the right size. Largemouth versus spotted bass. I think there's a lot of things at play here that make this a really interesting tournament. And just like we talked about with Wheeler last week on the podcast, I think a lot of times these kind of tournaments that maybe get overlooked a little bit end up being the ones that are most interesting and turn out to be some of the better events we have. So I would expect the same thing at Smith. I think all those things that get tied into negativity makes for a more intriguing tournament in a lot of ways. Same thing you and I have talked about dozens of times with the Sabine River. Like people always have this negative connotation towards certain places because the size of fish, whatever it may be. It's like there's so many interesting things at play that I can't see this not being an interesting tournament in some form or fashion. So yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting one, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. And like you said, being close to home, I mean, I can come home most nights and have dinner with my wife. I mean, this is going to be the best thing ever as far as tournaments are concerned. So I can't complain too much.
Little bit different when you think about it. We know how popular the Smith Lake Dam is. It's the midpoint of the lake. If you look at Smith Lake, it is a wide spreading long lake, not really wide in terms of on the waterway. It's pretty narrow in places, a lot of twists and turns and creeks, a lot of fingers and arms. Stretches pretty far though. And normally the dam is considered like the midpoint. You can go to the east, the west, and the north, those 3 arms of Smith. But this week we are taking off at a Smith Lake Park. And if my address is correct, that is on the far reaches east of the body of water, meaning that we're going to have some possible long, long runs, especially if people are headed up towards Arley, to the west, even to get to the dam. You have to probably travel a decent bit time wise to get there, depending on traffic as well. So we will see that east arm probably factor a little bit more for people who stay closer, but there's going to be plenty of opportunity to run. Before we fully get invested in the Smith Lake event, and give you all the details. Let's talk about last week's Bassmaster Open. You didn't have to work it on the water, and you got to be at home watching it and producing it, all the content online. First takeaway, we were there last year, different water conditions. This year, a little bit different, and it still played out offshore, a little bit shallower offshore, for some guys a little bit deeper. We saw some electronics factor. We had 5 former college anglers in our top 10. We had some veterans like Cody Meyer in there as well, make a huge jump in the points race to stay near the top. A lot of different storylines. And Easton Fothergill on that final day, he had been, somewhat consistent in the top 10 the whole week. And then on that final day, he got the bite that everyone dreams of, an 8-pound, 12-ounce largemouth. That is a game changer in definition. If you looked up the Webster's Dictionary for game changer for fishing, an 8-pounder, 2 pounds bigger than the biggest bass of the tournament thus far, that is what you call a game changer. At that point in the day, he only had one keeper. That was his second keeper. He fills his limit out, culls once, wins the tournament, and is now headed back to the Bassmaster Classic. And I believe the stat is he is the second angler ever from the college series to represent the college series on the opens and also then win an open that same season to make the classic back-to-back years. Tristan McCormick did it after winning the bracket in 2020
21.
or in 2021. He won the bracket. He goes and fishes the classic in 22 at Hartwell, and then later that year he wins Hartwell in the fall to make the 2023 classic. So Tristan did it, and now we have Easton Fothergill doing it. Boy, it's been impressive, and he's also in our points cut as well. So what are your some takeaways from watching that go down on Fox Sports 1 this weekend?
The first takeaway is exactly what you said. I mean, we're not sitting here trying to beat our own chest or anything, but like everything we do with the college series, the prospect list, the video series, the things that we've done, and you and I talk about it on the podcast every year. Seems like about it once a month it gets brought up. But I mean, the guys that come from the college series are just for real. I mean, that's something you guys talked about a lot on live, I know, but I mean, they're so ready by the time they get to the opens from having the opportunity to fish across the country and do, basically fish, you know, not necessarily professional tournaments, but basically go to the variety of bodies of waters that you would fish, as a professional. So by the time an Easton Fothergill, a lot of these guys in the top 10 on the final day get to the opens, like they have experience on bodies of water like that. And, him comparing it to the bracket, just what I guess a year before, and it's like a perfect example. Like when would he have ever went to Milford, Kansas to fish at Milford Lake otherwise if it wasn't for fishing a tournament? Granted, different times of the year, different bodies of water in a way, but he compared the two a lot in a lot of ways. And the second takeaway is like you said, that giant bass on day three. I mean, you just watching it, and one, you're like you said, game changer is the best way to put it. You're like, that's gonna make a massive difference in the tournament as it is. And then the thing that just like basically wrote the story for how tough of the final day was he sat on three with an 8 pounder for like a long time. I kept checking Bass Track, and then watching, just thinking, he'd sneak in a little keeper before we'd see one or something. I'm just like, man, alive, he might end up with three with an 8 pounder in his live well, and he's not gonna be able to sleep if he loses this tournament, only bringing in three on the final day. But obviously that wasn't the case. So very impressive win. Easton is the real deal. I think we've known that for a long time, way before he started fishing the opens. I think we all thought that through the college series and the fact that he's been on our prospect list every year basically since we've been doing it. And it's coming to show now. And like I said, it's rewarding to see these guys, obviously we're just looking at it objectively, but like to see these guys that you cover through the college series come up and have an instant impact in the opens and all these, higher level tournaments is just super, super rewarding to see because how hard these guys work just to get to that point and to, become skilled and, I guess just good enough to do it. It's not just like an overnight process. Like these guys got grind through, college and youth fishing, and then, it shows up early for them. It's really rewarding to see.
Yeah, and even like you said, the mental aspect of it. And what was cool was that you can't just dub him as just an electronics guy. He goes and catches some fish doing that. And like you said, stuck on three, he pulls up to a shallow bar. He said, "Hey, when in practice, when I found this, the wind was blowing from this direction right over this shallow, shallow bar, and they were biting the chatterbait." And then he catches like two or three keepers in a row and gets his limit and then calls, and you're like, wow, like that was quick. Like he removed all doubt if he was going to catch a limit. And we knew though that 8 pounder, that's like he gets the opportunity to weigh in like seven fish, and at that point, having three fish for like 11 and a half, 12 pounds, that's what everybody would want to weigh in as a limit. Like if you had 12, like you were doing good. And he had 12 on three because of an 8-12. And so that was great. Great to see. His scale was dead on 8-12 at the weigh-in as well. And he ends up winning the tournament there. You had other notables, Andrew Loberg, who fished a couple years ago in the college series from Chico State out west before moving to Gunnersville and making his way east to pursue this fishing thing as a career. He's had some great success across the country. He's someone that I highly uh, was endearing, like had a high thoughts and hopes for him. I think I even sat down and did a sit down interview with Andrew at Washita when they came because I knew that we would see him pop up at some point this year. And here he is doing what he does best and in contention. I believe he is also in our EQ points race. I think he's in the top. I'm clicking it. I think he's in the top 9 as well. Yeah, 8th place. So sitting there in a good spot. Connor Jacob jumps up. He's been, after a slow start's been slowly getting better, like Tommy said on Saturday, and he got third. He was one, uh, you know, spooning some docks, and it was great to see that, or not spooning some docks, but like drop shot and docks, but doing that type of technique that you would normally see. We did see Jack York with a big Magnum spoon on the turn on the final day, and then some other guys that were notable. Trey Swindle got 4th. 5th place was Bo Thomas. He is a Western Michigan, I believe, um, college angler, now graduated out. It was such a tight tournament that really there was no safety or security when it came to, oh, I was the leader. I've got a decent lead. No, Ty Faber um, didn't have much of a lead at all. Let me look at his day 2 lead. Ty Faber had, I think the top 5 were within a pound and a half of each other going into that final day. So 7th place was only like 2 pounds back. The only person who was really extra back was Jack York, who was an extra pound and a half behind 9th place. And so yeah, I'm looking at it now. Ty Faber had 34-12. He had a 4-ounce lead over second, a 5-ounce lead over third. He had a 1-1 lead over fourth, and he had a 1-7 lead over fifth, and like a 1 1 3/4 lead over sixth. So really such a tight tournament. And for him to fall to sixth was no crazy like collapse or anything like that. It was just that's how competitive and how tight it was. Everybody kind of had their moment too. Matt Adams had the opportunities. He was frustrated because he only brought in 3 and he had lost so many during the day. But great 5th stop. We're now in the second half of the season for the Opens. Uh, the next 4 months is when the rest of those tournaments transpire, one per month. So next month is St. Clair in July. August will be Leech Lake. September, Mississippi River. And then October is Lake Hartwell. And so excited to get the Opens in the back half of the season because the elites are in the back half as well. When we're talking about the points race, let me just read it real quick for those who are wanting the Tackle Warehouse EQ points race for the St. Croix Bassmaster Opens. You've got now, because of his win and doing so well, Easton Fothergill's in the lead, just a 9-point lead over Dakota Ebear. You have Evan Kung, who's fallen to third, Cody Meyer fourth, Matt Adams in fifth. Matt Adams has been, we just talked about him a minute ago, but he makes a top 10 in the first one, does, mid pack second one, top 10 third one, mid pack fourth one, and then top 10 this one. So he is very fearful for St. Clair. He does not want to go mid pack at St. Clair. Then we get to Ty Faber, 6th, Tucker Smith, 7th, Andrew Loberg, 8th, Jack York, 9th, and Matt Messer moves into the top 10. Want to touch on Ty Faber. If you don't know who that is, he was the t-shirt guy that everyone was admiring because everyone is against everything that professional fishing is these days. They don't like the jerseys. They don't like you having good technology. They don't like you having new boats. They hate everything about it. But the guy had a t-shirt on, and so they were like, he is my new king. And Ty Faber is from Colorado. He's a plumber when he's not traveling the country. I got to cover him, Kyle, at the 2016 Bassmaster Team Championship at Kentucky Lake. Him and his partner won the title, and then they did the fish off, and I think he finished like second, and he just narrowly missed out on making the Lake Conroe Bassmaster Classic. So Ty Faber, long time ago, Team Series, jumped into the Opens, and the only Colorado angler in the Bassmaster Opens, and he's representing in the top 10. So that's how the points shake out. You got just a stout top 10 right now. Top 9 will advance. Then you have a 11th through 20th is, just as stout. 21st through 30th, we said that last year. You could take the sample of 9 or 10 in each portion of the top 50 in points and that's a good rookie class. So we have a great race coming down to the wire the last 4 events.
Yeah, and to our point earlier about the college fishing, I mean, you look at the top 10, 6 of the 10 are former college anglers. So I mean that just adds to that theory even more. But yeah, like you said, it's definitely getting to the point of the season which we talk about, last year a lot, is where you could basically split up the top 10, each section of 10, and you could look at it and be like, yeah, I could believe that's the top 10. Like easily believe that's the guys that are going to qualify. And you look down the list and it's like you could go way down and see a lot of guys. But no, I mean the guys that are sitting up there now, I mean they certainly have earned it to this point, and obviously you're going to see a swing in the schedule in a sense, going to smallmouth country and obviously got a tournament in the fall
And I
in the Mississippi River. Definitely some variety. So certainly sure there's going to be some shakeups along the way.
and I really expect the top four to be okay in smallmouth country. And you were talking about college fishing. I talked to a buddy, Jarrett Freeze, his son. They're from they're I fished against him and fishes him in. His son's a high school angler, possibly doing the college route. Maybe college isn't for him, maybe community colleges, whatever. Asking kind of like what the process to go to the next level is or the step that he should take. And I told him, like it doesn't matter what the funding of the college is. Obviously, if you get more funding, it makes it easy financially, but like it's not like there's a here's the program that's going to send you to the elites or send you to the opens prepared. Like it's really just about you and time on the water, and that shows in our points race. You have Easton, you were talking about the college guys, Easton from Montevallo, Dakota Ebear from Tarleton State in Texas. You have Tucker Smith, Auburn. You have Andrew Loberg, Chico State. You have Matt Messer, Kentucky Christian. You go down the list a little bit more. Bo Browning, Montevallo slash Drury, and um, Cody Stahl went to SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. And so there's so many different schools represented in our top 20 in points from college that it's not like there's here's your, the University of Alabama in football, or here's your UConn of basketball. There are some really good schools, yes, but to send them to the pros, to get that top 10 pick or whatever, um, not as clear cut. It's all about what you do when you get to those levels. Speaking of levels, let's transition over to the Bassmaster Elite Series. Smith Lake, stop number 7. We have 2 more stops after this, and they're both smallmouth events in the month of August. So we'll have about a month and a half break from the Elite Series after this event. This is going to be the test of time for those who are nervous about it or worried that are inside the classic cut. They got to try to kind of protect a little bit more before you head up north. For those who are looking for some chaos to swap up the leaderboard and maybe they can benefit from it, here's your tournament. This is going to be the one. 5 fish limit, 15 inches per keeper. That is the X factor game changer here. 15 inches is not easy for spotted bass at times. You could have a 15-inch 3-pounder. You could have a pound and a half that's a bullet in 15 inches. Like it's just, and it's not a guarantee that you're going to catch 5 15-inchers. Largemouth are also, factored in that, so we'll keep an eye on that. But Justin Hamner came in studio, was our color analyst for the Open this past week, and was really excited. And here's a little, I think, let me look at the calendar before I say it. Let me look at the calendar. In the month of May, when was Memorial Day? Was it the 19th? No, I think Memorial Day was like the 26th. No, 27th. Okay, there it is. So the 27th, and he went Memorial Day weekend. So maybe it wasn't on Memorial Day, but the weekend, a couple days leading up to it, he goes to Smith to practice the conditions as close as you can get. So he went on one of the most pleasure boating days of the year, weekends of the year, and closest to the cutoff. And he had such a blast that he thinks this is going to be a great tournament. He thinks it's going to be super fun. It's going to be awesome. So I'm looking forward to, I hear that report. It's never going to be easy. Like we always talk about this, like you said, the Sabine. I'm talking about easy tournaments, but this is going to be dynamic. It's going to be fun. We're going to see some guys. Maybe somebody's going to be in our top 6 after day 1 and be on live after making a 45-mile run as far as you can get away from takeoff. Maybe as far as you can get away from pleasure boats. Who knows? That could work for a day. Who knows? So I'm looking forward to it. I love spotted bass, and I love the uncertainty of certain tournaments.
Yeah, and you look at it on a map. You talked about it earlier, but when you look at Smith Lake on a map, I mean, it is certainly not very wide in any places. Like you said, pretty narrow in the majority of the lake, but it's not like there's a lack of places to fish. I mean, the amount of giant creek arms and the rivers that run into it, I mean, there's so much water. to fish that I think, like you said, we'll see some guys just run away from the traffic and you know, do their own thing, and that's going to work. And there's going to be things that happen in the tournament that, like, right this second, we're not even thinking of. Like, that's kind of how I view this. I think somebody's going to find some stuff that's just like off the wall entirely compared to what we think's going to happen. And what, like you said, whether it works for 4 days or not, that's the thing to be determined. But I think we're going to see some stuff happen at Smith that, you know, maybe people didn't expect. Hopefully that's in the form of, like, you know, big largemouth on a buzzbait or a whopper plopper or something, just something wild. But I haven't, you know, just this expectation that something's going to happen that we're not expecting right now.
And it's a really good jig lake as well. So like,
Certainly.
just the opportunity to catch spotted bass under docks or largemouth under docks.
Brush. I mean,
That's
brush
yeah,
for days. I mean, there's
100%.
so much brush piles. I mean, there's a lot of different things at play. I mean, you're
There
making a
there
point.
are bluffs back in creeks. Like it's not just like main lake bluffs. Like you go and turn in. I can think about the creek right now where I tried to boat flip a 4 pound spotted bass and I broke my line and it hits the back gunnel and just like falls back in the water. I'm replaying it in my mind and it's just like these fish get big. And so before we jump in, I want to I'm gonna instead of doing the question of the day at the end, I'm going to do it at the beginning before we really get into exactly what we talk about for our picks and other things. But let me pull this up real quick. The I don't know if I have like I don't know if we have a gauge of this already from past tournaments. Like we said, we've only fished opens and college events here, and some nation regionals and things like that, but no Elite Series events. We fished the college events mostly in February and April. We fished the opens in April or May and October. So we really haven't had any summer events here. So it's kind of a big toss up. But Kyle, the B&W trailer hitches question of the day. Okay. I'm going to hit you with it early. B&W trailer hitches question of the day is: will our big bass of the tournament be a spotted bass or a largemouth? Because we're going to see 95% of the fish weighed in be spotted bass. But will someone catch the biggest bass of the tournament on day one, possibly going after largemouth, doing something like that? Maybe they don't win the tournament. Maybe they fall down after just a great day one. But will the big bass of the tournament be a spotted bass or a largemouth? You think about that. But today's episode is proudly sponsored by B&W Trailer Hitches, our go-to for all our towing needs. Made in America, top-notch quality, components backed by a lifetime warranty. B&W has you covered whether you're towing your boat to the lake or your trailer for some work stuff, maybe your RV for some vacation. The tow and stow adjustable ball mount in particular is a great hitch for anglers. Adjustable drop, different sizes, different options, and it stows away when you're not towing anything so you don't hit your shin on your trailer hitch. B&W Trailer Hitches, appreciate them being a part of the podcast. And Kyle, I'll repeat the question. B&W Trailer Hitches question of the day. Big bass of the tournament, we're going to see it be a spotted bass, maybe a 4, 5, 6 pounder, or will we see it be a largemouth?
You know, I feel like the easy answer is largemouth because I think we will see some good largemouth get caught. But then you factor in the spotted bass. I think there'll be some spotted bass that are just eaters. You know, I mean, like just fish that feed all the time because that's kind of what spotted bass are to a degree. So I wouldn't be surprised either way, but I do think we'll see an outlier largemouth. Somebody's going to catch them shallow or out of a brush pile around a dock, like you said, somewhere that, you know, that a largemouth would live, you know, theoretically. And I think we're going to see one big largemouth. But I would not be surprised at all if we see some 4+ pound spotted bass, you know, get caught. I mean, I'm saying 4+. I think there'll be several over 4, but I'm talking like, you know, well north of 4 pounds. But
So
time of the year
I
is
hear
tough.
your mental process here, and you kind of give an answer, but you kind of haven't. So you got
I'm
to
saying
so
largemouth for
largemouth.
sure.
Okay, now
Yeah,
tell me a
largemouth for
size.
sure.
What's the size of the largemouth? You got to put a weight on
14 pounds and
it.
3 ounces.
That's not.
I don't know. Let's say somebody's gonna catch a 6'12"
Oh
largemouth. Somebody's
wow,
gonna catch a big one, real big one.
wow.
Six
Okay,
twelve.
I'm going counter because I just love spotted bass so much, and I think that we're gonna see a spotted bass be the big bass of the tournament. And I'm gonna go just under 6, and I'm gonna go a 5'10" spotted bass is the big bass of the tournament.
The big
5'10"
one.
spotted bass. That is a big one. Show me. So we both have some Smith Lake ties. You fished there a couple times since you've lived in Alabama. I was fishing there in October on Halloween. Um, And that day when I was fishing Smith, I got the call from Steve Bowman that said, "Hey, JM Associates going to probably call you at some point in the future and offer you a full-time position to move to Little Rock." And I was like, "Okay, awesome." I got back to fishing, expected like a later that day call, expected tomorrow when I'm driving home call. It was like mid-December, right before Christmas. I was like, "You waited a month and a half to call." I was worried that Bowman was just out of his mind and was lying. He was not telling the truth, but not the case. But I was on Smith, had a great day, and I do think a big spotted bass will show up. I think I've caught I think my biggest spotted bass, I think I have Lanier and Hartwell and Norman. Um, but I think like my fourth or fifth biggest spotted bass ever came at Smith, but it wasn't not my top three. Not yet. I've only fished Smith twice.
I'm probably about the same way. I've only fished Smith a handful of times. I fish the Coosa River more often than Smith, but I do like Smith a lot. Certain times of the year, it is so much fun. I think in the winter time, I haven't got up there in the fall when everybody loves to go throw a topwater. I've yet to experience that. It's one of the things I still would like to do. Find some time to carve out from watching college football and NFL football to go get in on the topwater action, but. I guess the second biggest spotted bass I've ever caught would have been at Smith, and that was in January. But there are certainly some big ones in there, and they're all like, that's the thing. There's plenty of like you said, non-keeper spotted bass. I think guys will catch like little ones, of course, too, just because there's so many fish in the lake. That's not a bad thing. It's just there's a lot of fish. Um, but there are a lot of like 2.5 to 3.5 pound, spots. I mean, there are some really, really healthy spots in there. So I think we'll see plenty of those, even despite it being post-spawn, inching towards the middle of summer. I think we'll see some plenty healthy ones that are like I said earlier, the ones that eat constantly all year long.
Yeah, I talked to Brent Crow, who lives there and fishes there. When I was talking to him, he was at the St. Lawrence River, so he was obviously had gone north for the summer and was fishing up there. But he had said, we're seeing a lot of 2 to 3 pound spotted bass everywhere. Places we would have seen 4 pound spotted bass in the past. Um, and that he's not quite sure where the big ones went. And we started talking about, and I was like, well, it seems like when spotted bass get to a certain size on other lakes, they go to the deep timber line and they basically just hang out with striper the rest of their life. Like if you're fishing for striper, you're going to catch a big spotted bass. And he said, dude, there are so many striper guys that are like, I caught a 6 pounder today, blah, blah, blah. And so there will be a guy on Bass Live, most likely targeting that deeper stuff. Half of his fish catches will be striper, but he will also catch a giant. So I think we'll see that 5'10" spotted bass come through from somebody fishing deeper like that. Hopefully it's on top water, honestly. But
Agreed.
um, like hopefully we see that on top water. But if it is caught deeper, it may be some other techniques and tactics. But how big was your spotted bass that you caught there? I think I caught like a 4 1/4, but that was, I mean, I grew up on spotted bass lakes, so I didn't, it's not like it was like, oh, I'm gonna go do that and catch my first spot or something.
Yeah, it was barely over 4 pounds, which at the time that I had moved here, I mean, it was like right when I moved here, and I'd not caught a 4 pounder even at that point. I've since, like I said, caught some really big ones on Mitchell and Lay and the Coosa River, but I think it was right over 4 pounds. I mean, just barely, so pretty much 4 pounder.
There's a little bit of historical. You were talking about Coosa River spots, and then there's Kentucky's. There's other, and there's just what you would call spotted bass. There's other spotted bass genres, and Smith Lake features one of those. Not only is it a blueback herring lake, so these fish act like Lake Murray and Lake Hartwell fish, but then they act different because they are a different strain of spotted bass. And I believe, if I get my stories correct, hopefully you know the history of it too, but these spotted bass were some kind of, you know, embargo or trade deal. I'll give you a first round pick and cash considerations, and you give us California spotted bass. And so I believe through, I think maybe Auburn University and some other things with the state of Alabama, they had done some species sampling, and they got spotted bass from California and were able to put them in there. Then you mix in blueback herring, and these are probably the wildest, craziest. I'm gonna hear them say big one all week long on Bass Live, and it's gonna be a pound and a half spotted bass that may not measure 15 inches because of how hard these fish may fight. Because they're just a different genre, and they also feed on crazy bait fish that makes them just wired for for chaos. I think that's correct. Does that all sound accurate?
I think you're right. I've heard the same thing. Like you said, I mean, I've not read a specific article or anything specific about it, but I think you're exactly right. I think it's the kind of the same strain. Again, I'm no expert in this either, but the same kind of strain that you'd see in like Bullard's Bar and some of those places in California. Naturally, you don't see them necessarily all grow to the same size as the giants that we see from Bullard's Bar and those lakes in California, but they are built similar. A lot of them are, and I think you're exactly right on that.
There will be more boats on Smith Lake in the 4 days of the Elite Series event than there will be in the next 4 months at Bullard's Bar. That's why it gets so big at Bullard's. That is why. But no, so I'm super excited about that. So have you got to talk to anybody through practice? I normally try to leave these guys alone. You do as well, but didn't know how day one went. I've seen a lot of portable fans. I think these Elite Series guys have caught on and they're getting smarter. Wheeler was hot, and maybe this will minimize the complaints a little bit, but I saw 3 or 4 portable lithium charged fans on the front deck of guys' boats. And so I'll take it, adapt and overcome.
Yeah, it's gonna be warm, but we had a little fan. My camera boater did at Wheeler, and it didn't seem to do a whole lot. So I don't know how much that's gonna work out, but I'm sure it's not gonna hurt any as well.
Pushing the air around.
Yes.
Um, Man, Smith Lake, I think Tommy was saying the last time that like maybe a pro level event, it wasn't the Elite Series, but I think in like '04, the Bassmaster Tour or the Bassmaster, you know, Top 100 or whatever, visited Smith. And it goes back to being like one of the first 2 years of B.A.S.S. in general. Smith was a place, but I guarantee you, back in the '60s, early '70s, Smith was probably largemouth dominated, did not have blueback herring. It's a different body of water. It is just a different body of water. And we've started to see lakes like Hartwell adjust where you had to have largemouth to win. Smith used to be that, it seems like you have to have a largemouth or two in your bag, maybe a limit of largemouth through the week, but you're probably going to weigh for a 4 day event, you're going to weigh 13 or 14, maybe 15 spotted bass and 5 largemouth. That's your goal. Um, Whereas like Hartwell was like that, and now you can win major tournaments with just spotted bass. And so I feel like, will the winner, a second question for you, will the winner have any largemouth out of his 20 fish, or will the winner catch 20 fish? I'm assuming the winner will catch 20 fish, but or weigh in 20 keepers, but will the winner need to have a largemouth through the 4 days?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Without a doubt, it's um definitely gonna be 20 fish for sure. They're going to catch plenty of keepers, I would think. That's a great question. I'd like to think ideally somebody would mix them in, but also like I think that somebody that just hardcore goes for the spotted bass all day and just makes those incremental culls. Um, in a perfect world, as an angler, you think like I want to do something to catch my limit, like a good limit, and then I'll go, fish for largemouth and catch a big one, or whatever it may be. I think in a perfect world, that's the way to work, but I don't think that's what'll happen. I think somebody's just going to get on a deal with strictly spotted bass and find a way to catch those bigger than average spots and make it last for 4 days. So I'm going to say all spots, but also like I said, in a perfect world, I'd like to see somebody catch a big limit of spots and then go catch a giant on a buzzbait or
Yes.
whatever it may be. But I would say all spotted bass, but I could be certainly wrong.
What's funny is it seems like it's going to be backwards from normal people game plans. I'm going to go catch a couple fish up shallow and then I'll move offshore later in the day. Whereas this week it's going to be I'm going to fish all my main lake stuff as early and often as possible before the boaters get out there. And then I may move up shallow or somewhere that's protected in the back of a creek and try to upgrade there. Instead of starting shallow and moving deep, I feel like people are going to be out in the main lake and then they're going to suck into the creeks and the pockets as
Sure.
best as they can to maybe make that work. But that's going to be the task that we see when we're picking our fantasy teams, how we're going to balance this. We've got our team set up. You're probably going to want to, if you're doing good in Rapala Bassmaster fantasy fishing, you may want to mute my portion of the segment because you may not want to listen to me at all. But Kyle, let's jump in and do our Rapala Bassmaster fantasy picks, buckets A through E, um, and how we kind of what strategy we maybe played because and Drain the Lake there's a strategy as well because there's some guys who would do great in the smallmouth swing, but you've kind of used up 3/4 of the season, and so now you're going to have to balance. Maybe some of those smallmouth guys are good enough at finesse. You're going to have to bring them over and put them in the spotted bass game because it's getting easier to catch smallmouth. Like the guys who maybe were weaknesses, you could probably maybe get away with them there. Whereas this week, you really could be thrown for a curve. So in Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing, give me your A through E real quick.
All right, let's start with bucket A. I'm back on the Patrick Walters train. Patrick Walters and bucket A. I feel like I've done a fairly decent job this year of um I've pretty well used him in bucket A for almost every tournament other than like the one there's one tournament where he's in bucket B when he fell down a little bit. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty
I
sure
think
I've
he was
used
I
him
think he
for
was bucket B at Wheeler
okay.
because he was
So
like 20th in points. He had to be. Yeah, I think.
maybe that have been the case, but I've used him in bucket A a lot. I've said since the beginning of the year I was going to kind of treat him like I should have treated Welcher and Cobb last year, just because I thought the schedule played out so well for him. Bucket A is full of dudes that likely will catch him. Jordan Lee being one of them, obviously eating up a lot of the player percentage. Bucket A, Justin Hamner. I mean, two guys that are eating up well over half of the player percentage, and rightfully so. But to me, I just think Patrick Walters has proved his whole career that this is the type of fishery that he does extremely well at. We obviously saw it at Murray. You made the comparison earlier with Murray and Smith, although it's obviously largemouth at Murray versus spots, similar fishing styles.
He's won at Hartwell in an open.
100%. And he's fished, and I went and looked. I gotta go look. He's fished an open
And I think he won at
at
Lanier in the NPFL. Like I think so. He's spotted bass large. It doesn't like he knows.
and he fished an open there a few years ago, and I want to say finished in the 30s somewhere. I mean, it wasn't like a top 10 finish, but obviously 30s in the opens is a fantastic finish. So for me, it was a matter of Patrick Walters fitting the bill of being a little lower player percentage than Hamner and Jordan Lee. So I got Patrick Walters in A.
Well,
Bucket
why don't
B.
we normally you just go and list them and then we go back and talk. But since you explained, I'll just jump in with mine and we'll just
I
explain
can't
each
help it.
pick.
I'm
So
sorry. I just got to
no, it was
justify my
good.
picks.
Hey, I understand. Cody Huff is my bucket A pick. He's on a heater this year, and I think that this is a great opportunity. I don't think Trey will stumble, but I think this is a great opportunity if Cody wants to try to win Angler of the Year. Um, where is he looking at in the points? He's like third, I think.
Third, I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, third, but he's down by 86 points. So he's got to make up ground this week. I know that Trey's worried about his smallmouth ability in the last two, something to be monitored and watched, but Cody can gain 15 or 20 points here. It's much more doable going to the last two events. So I think Cody Huff, same reasons why we would think of the Carolina guys. Man, where he lives on the White River, those pelagic offshore fish, he's not afraid to do that game and do well at it. So I'd expect him to show up big time. Cody Huff, bucket A.
All right. So moving down, bucket B. I've got the hometown-ish pick in Will Davis Jr. Um,
Already won there before.
Absolutely. Won a nation event there, has done well historically in a lot of events here at Smith. And it's one of those deals. I mean, he's obviously a, Coosa River guy at heart. That's where he lives closest to. But his success at Smith, like you said, we've seen him have success there. Additionally, I think this style of fishing just suits him. I mean, you saw him do well at Murray as well. There's evidence, at least in my mind, in his short career that this style of fishing, suits him well, and I could easily see Will Davis, having a great event there. So 21.3 player percentage, definitely a little higher. There's a few guys in the teens in bucket B, but Will Davis, I'm going with the high player percentage in bucket B and just taking it.
Uh, this is the winner's bucket. Bucket B is the winner's bucket. You've got two Bassmaster Opens winners from Smith Lake in this bucket. You have the nation regional winner, Will Davis, in this bucket. And so I'm going with one of the winners, and that would be Hank Cherry. So Hank fishes around spotted bass and lakes that act like Smith his whole life. Lake Norman, my home lake growing up, his home lake currently. He fishes for spotted bass differently than others, though. And so I think that it'll translate well here. It did obviously in the fall one year when he won. Different time of year. It's tough. Not an easy time of year to fish either, but I think the way that Hank fishes, he could accidentally catch some largemouth as well, or he could go fish for largemouth and catch some big spotted bass just with his crossover style of he just puts himself in a good position to do both. And so I like Hank for this one. You've got, like I said, Poroznik's also in here. He's won an Open. To think that you've won the most recent time that we've ever been here and you're at 4%, people must not have researched much because Jacob Poroznik won the last time we were here, I think 2021. And because then he made the classic at Hartwell where he was on the short list of guys who we thought could do well there as well. So and then obviously Hank got his start in 2013 on the Elite Series because of his 2012 Opens victory at Smith to end the season. And so Hank is my pick. There's a couple other great guys in that bucket or in this deal as well. That you've got the Pollinix, Drew Benton's had great finishes here. Justin Atkins, Robert G could do well here. Logan Parks. Fishing for $1 million this week. We didn't bring this up in the preview part of it. If you're listening for fantasy, just hang on 1 second. We're about to get to bucket C. But Logan Park said that they have tagged bass and crappie in Smith, like 100 fish. Some of them are tagged with like a truck you can win. Some are tagged with other money. There's one bass. I don't know if it's a spotted bass. I'm assuming it would be. One spotted bass in Smith Lake that's tagged for $1 million. Wouldn't that be crazy, Kyle? If we saw someone on Bassmaster Live catch a tagged fish and they look at it and the tag says $1 million and they're not registered for it, like as soon as I watch Logan Park's video, screw it, I'll register for it. Like you could win $1 million catching one spotted bass. It's gonna happen on live, and the person's not gonna be registered for the thing. I promise you. And we're gonna be like, we're gonna replay. They're gonna power pole replay that of the day. Like you had a chance at $1 million and you missed it. But I guess it's through the state of Alabama. Either way, super crazy. Me and you should just honestly, if it doesn't get caught this week in the elite, we don't have another elite for a month and a half. We should just fish all of July and try to catch
Camp
it.
out.
We
Yeah.
will literally just we'll split the money. 500 G's to each of us.
I can see that working out. I mean, and I back to fantasy fishing. I only wanted to add this because I put it in my story as well. Bucket B really is loaded with guys. Another guy you didn't even mention, I'm not just saying this because he's my boy. Wes Logan has a top 10 in an Open at Smith and has three top 30 finishes in a row, like has some momentum rolling. And that's wasn't even one of the guys we talked about because of the amount of other dudes in Bucket B that have, proven success on Smith or like very similar to Smith. So
So you
Bucket B, you
said
have a lot of
so
different options.
you said three top 30s in a row.
I want to say, unless
Is
I'm
there any
unless
is
I'm
there any coincidence that he just turned 30 on Sunday? Is that like three top 30? He's gonna keep the top 30s going now?
Could have been. Could have been. Yeah, okay, I am right. You had me tripping there thinking I
No,
was
no, no.
wrong.
I was just
20,
tying it in his birthday.
29th, 14th, and 24th. So I was correct. I just When you said that, I was like, was I wrong in thinking that? I thought he did.
I put it in a
Um,
publication. Oh,
yeah, I did. I did. I wrote it in my article. Now I look like a dummy. Um, but let's go ahead and move to bucket C.
yeah, move this thing
Bucket
along,
C,
Tom.
I'm going. Yeah, I'm trying. I'm sorry. Bucket C, I am going very low player percentage, but I could not believe how low his player percentage was. I'm going Austin Felix in bucket C. Obviously, not having the greatest season, of his career to this point, but I think this is where he turns it around. Obviously,
Ooh, these last three for him.
I just think, yeah, set up so well for him. I think it's not necessarily history at Smith Lake as much as it is history doing well with pelagic fish, fish that move around, whether it be spotted bass, largemouth. I think he's obviously a expert with his electronics as well. Fishes with your boy Trent a good bit,
Yeah,
who's quite
Lanier.
the spotted bass expert at Lanier.
He wants to
Um,
think he's a master. He
and
lost when I said that whole thing. When I said um the October, the Halloween deal. It was a 4 boat derby in a video format I used to do. We all would run GoPros and we would all do it like, but we would fish with certain types of baits. Like you can only throw top water for the next 3 hours, and then you can only throw this for the next 3 hours. And we did that. And I just want to say it was my boys Josh Oliver from Jacksonville State back in the day, college fishing, Evan Horn from North Alabama, Trent from Georgia Southern, and myself from East Carolina. We all went and did it. And Trent deemed himself at the hotel as a spotted bass master. And he got last. So so we beat up on our boy
heard
Trent
about
pretty
that.
good.
Still hearing about it. Still hearing about it. Almost a decade later. Um,
The famous last words.
But anyways, back to the
Austin
Felix
Felix,
point.
yes.
Made the comment even at Wheeler on stage that how excited he was looking to Smith and going to fish for some spotted bass. Obviously, there's plenty of anglers in Bucket C that you could justify picking over him. But that's where I'm taking a risk. I'm taking a risk with 1.9 player percentage in Bucket C and going with Austin Felix.
Well, I'm going with another low percentage guy as well, and a little shocking. I'm sticking with the Lake Norman deal though. I think Shane LaHue, man, there you could pick
Like
KJ
it.
Queen in this as well. I think LaHue is going to where's he at in the points race? He's obviously in bucket C, so he's above 60th, but he is just outside the classic cut, 44th right now. Shane will be inside the classic cut at the end of this event. So sorry, Shane, if you're not and you have your worst finish of the year, that's my fault for picking you. But um, I expect Shane LaHue. I would even expect Shane LaHue to be here on Championship Sunday.
I could easily see that. In my fantasy column, he was my backup pick, so I like that pick a lot. Moving to bucket D, you and I both talked about this before we started the podcast. Bucket D is a tough one. I mean, there's not a lot of super clear, obvious favorites that you would go with and think that you know, would be like obvious picks. But I'm going with, I guess, what I would consider the most obvious of the choices, being Joseph Webster. Uh, Hamilton, Alabama is what it says on his profile, but which is very close to Smith. But I got the chance to talk to him at Harris Chain, and we were talking about, where he fishes the most and, where he enjoys fishing the most in Alabama. And he said that I guess either is moving to Smith Lake or has already moved to Smith Lake, like technically lives right there at the lake. So, when you talk about having a little bit of a home field advantage, there's a few other guys in the field that'll have that with, Swindles fish there a ton, of course, Jordan Lee. There's some guys in that general neck of the woods. Justin Atkins not being too far in Florence that have had a lot of experience on Smith, whether it just be fun fishing, local tournaments, whatever it may be. But when you're talking about somebody that's from that close to Smith Lake, and then you talk about a time of the year where he's probably fished the lake more than the majority of the guys in the field, subtract, like I said, maybe Jordan Lee and Swindle. Um, I'm just going with Joseph Webster. I got him getting some positive momentum and having a good finish here at his home lake.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. We talked about the locals, and I didn't want to put pressure on him by saying that, but yeah, he is lives more close. I always associate him to being like an old school Tennessee River guy. Like lived in Mississippi, was near Pickwick, and then has moved since to not far from the Tuscaloosa region. I like past this exit on the highway when I cut across from when you're going Mississippi and you stay south and you cut through Alabama
Yep.
to make your way through Cullman. You'd go by his exit, but I think yeah, like you said, this would be as local as it gets. Because there's a lot of guys who are not far from Smith, but they wouldn't
Sure.
call it their
Sure.
home. They fish different lakes and they don't really travel to Smith because they've got five more closer. But I like it. I'm going Brian New, sticking with the guys who maybe know blueback herring. Um, Got to turn it around. Got to figure it out. This is the bucket where you have to catch him this week if you want to make the Bassmaster Classic. It was like last week was bucket E had to catch him. This week's bucket D has to catch him. And then the last two events, if you're in bucket C, you're gonna have to catch him to make the classic. Like, that's the next pressure buckets will be C and B to stay in the classic or jump in it. So I'm thinking Brian New, 3%. Jake Whitaker's another good one. I can see him doing well this week. You've got guys like Tim Doobie. He's never seen a blueback herring in his life until Lake Murray, but I would expect his style of fishing to translate. He could do well here. Then you've got some veterans, the elites, who have seen lakes like this or maybe types of lakes. And so Bucket D is interesting, but you got to catch them this week. Let's go to Bucket E, the guys who definitely have to have a top 10 this week.
I think you and I may share a pick here, but I'm
Uh-oh.
going with Bryant Smith.
Ooh.
There's certainly some I mean, we've talked about this all year and it's just a continuing theme. There are a lot of names in bucket E that you just would not expect to be here at this point of the season, but Brian Smith, with as good of a season he had last year, would be one of those names, I think, in my mind, that I wouldn't have expected to see here. Uh Excels with clear, deep water, spotted bass. I
California
think
guy.
that, yeah, 100%. I just think it suits his style. I made the pick beforehand, but I saw a post on Instagram of his yesterday that said he was catching a bunch of fish, just trying to find the right quality. My mind would say he's probably caught some quality if he's catching a lot of fish. So I'm not saying pick him based on that, but that definitely made me feel good about my pick if he's getting a lot of bites already on the first day of practice. So we'll take that for what it's worth. But Bryant Smith and Bucket E is a great pick. I mean, 11%. So I mean, he's right there with a handful of other guys. Um, there's
Canterbury
a lot of guys.
overwhelmingly is the most,
Yeah,
28%.
and along with Swindle being 20%, and then a few other guys right around that 10, 11%. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I just think stylistically, it just fits him really well. I'm sure he's probably fished there at some point, but I just think style wise alone that Bryant Smith's a good pick in E.
And one of his roommates on the road is David Gaston, who is a Coosa River guy, but probably has fished, knows about Smith, so they probably
Sure.
have talked some. I did not match you in this one. I picked Paul
Okay.
Mueller. I do have Bryant Smith on my Drain the Lake, but Paul Mueller, um, I think that this is he won Lanier a few years ago. I think his smallmouth ability matches up with spotted bass ability in this certain circumstance. And so I expect him to pull some tricks out and be able to catch some fish. Also, he's going to be eating good this week. No doubt about it. He's going to be catching some striper and filleting them up. No doubt about it. That is what he is, the name of the game. But Mueller, I expect him to be one with Smith Lake this week, and he will have a good event. So my five are Cody Huff, Hank Cherry, Shane LeHue, Brian New, and Paul Mueller.
My five, just to go over here, we got Patrick Walters, Will Davis, Austin Felix, Joseph Webster, and Bryant Smith. And that's another thing, we don't have to go deep into it, but it's funny your picks being Carolina heavy. I almost went with that exact approach when you think about spotted bass, you know, obviously herring lakes, lakes that are similar to Smith. You could put Smith Lake in North Carolina or South Carolina, and it would like fit the bill for like pretty much all those lakes over there for the most part.
And they're
At
not worried
least
about
very
boat
similar.
traffic. Lake
Sure,
Norman is the
sure.
NASCAR, the Charlotte Lake. Yeah, it's how to fish around boat traffic. So,
Yeah, no
um,
doubt.
that's
So I
another
mean
thing.
that's not a bad, it's really not a bad thought. Like if you were
There's
just trying to look for a theme, like, Carolina anglers of that region are not a bad choice on Smith.
they're not really there's not really many people that call spotted bass like that have not knowledge of spotted bass. Most of our field doesn't fish around a spotted bass lake. And if it is, it's a different strand of spotted bass. Um, and so it's comfort. I don't feel like they're gonna let me
Sure.
down. I feel like it's safe. And I feel like they know what they're doing. They're not spooked by any of the factors. They may not like them, but they're not spooked by them. Now let's go to Falcon rods, drain the lake, where me and you both excel this year compared to our Rapala Bassmaster fantasy fishing. Just so everyone's completely aware and transparent, I am at 63% for fantasy fishing, and I'm at 93% for drain the lake. So if you have it muted, you can unmute it now because we're doing drain the lake, and so you can trust me more. I did have one issue. I had Wesley Gore on my team here, and I already had used him at Toledo because he was on my team. So I do my spreadsheet for the year, and I accidentally had him written in two different lakes, and so he's already taken for Toledo. So I can't use him this week. So we swapped him out and put in someone else who I forgot to use earlier in the year. So we will get to that. But let's go drain the lake. Give me your first four in.
First four in, I've got Joseph Webster, Bryant Smith, Tyler Rivette, and Logan Parks.
Ooh, um, my first four in. I will just say some of the ones we've already said so that we can get to the new guys later. But Joseph Webster's in my first four, along with Bryant Smith, Paul Mueller, and Shane LeHue. So Mueller matches on both mine. I'm riding your train of thought for the Bryant Smith for Drain the Lake. LeHue duplicates on both of mine, and Webster, not on my fantasy, but he's on my Drain the Lake because I understand why you picked him, and I had picked him for this same very thing. So my first four are Webster, Mueller, Smith, and Shane LeHue. Um, Explain to me the Rivette. Did you forget to pick him somewhere? No, I'm just
No, that's
kidding.
actually borderline what happened. I'm not even kidding when you say that jokingly. That's partially what happened is when I was looking, for me, this is the time of the year. I don't do the same thing you do in the sense that you plan out all your picks before the season like you guys do in studio. I don't do that. I have it in my head, where I'd like to use certain guys. Most guys in the field I can look at and like pick an event where I think that's their best chance to win or top 10 or have their best finish. Um, but for me, it was like I was looking through and I was like, how have I not used Rivette? And then Rivette missing the cut at Wheeler, I want to say pretty narrowly, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 59th. Um, I just think he's a very underrated electronics guy. And I say underrated, it's not like he hasn't had success. I mean, his one win was on Okeechobee for Pete's sake, using a jerkbait. So I mean, it's not like people don't know that, but I think he's way, way better with his electronics than people give him credit for. You see Louisiana and you know that he can fish shallow, and you kind of forget how good he is with his electronics. I just like him bouncing back. And like I said, I'd feel really dumb not to use him at any point this season. So I was, trying to weigh the options of who I could save by using Rivette this week and then save for smallmouth fishing. So that's pretty much why I didn't really give you much of an answer. I just talked for a
No,
minute, but Rivette's on my team nonetheless, so we can stop talking about it. To finish out my
your last four in. Let's go.
Jordan Lee, Will Davis, Justin Hamner, and Wesley Gore. And if you couldn't tell, my roster is very heavy Alabama guys. So that's my final four.
My final four, Justin Atkins matching up with you. I've got Trey McKinney. So Trey, you haven't missed a cut all year. If you miss one this year, that's my fault. But Trey, I feel like his style of fishing, it'll set up decent for him here, even if he's never fished. He's now fished for blueback herring eaters at Murray. A little bit more info, a little bit more figuring out that process, and then spinning rods coming into play. The same types of things he tricked him with there, he could trick him with here. Then I've got Jeff Gustafson. I think the smallmouth swing, for those who know smallmouth well, the secrets they may have held don't have nearly as much of an advantage as they used to have on smallmouth places, if that makes sense. The Johnstons will do well, but those lakes aren't close to Gussie's home. It's not his home lake. If we were going to the Lake of the Woods, I'd still save him for the smallmouth and large, I'd save him for there. But it's not his home. Some of the tricks that you did for smallmouth, you don't have to do anymore, and they are electronics driven. So I'm not going to use him for the northern swing. I'm going to use him here because I feel like he is A-okay. Um, and then my last one, I forgot to use this man earlier in the year. John Cox is on my team this week. So I'm praying for someone to catch a bag of largemouth somewhere because I think that John's going to do that. But John has made top tens here before. If you ever remember that famous, for bad reasons, FLW event, he's in the top 10, swaps to their boat, gets thrown out of the boat because of something, with the motor or whatever, and was swimming when the boat came doing circles above him. Like, I'll never forget that story. And that was at Smith. And so he made the top 10 there. So whether it is some spotted bass, maybe he's cranking, maybe he is up a river, maybe he's throwing a top water all day. I'm not afraid of John Cox throwing a top water bait all day. I'm not afraid of him skipping docks. I'm not afraid of him running real far. I think that he'll keep the mojo going from Wheeler, and he will do well here. So I may have forgot him, but it might have been for good reasons.
It might work out well.
It
Yeah, it
may
really
work out
could.
very well. So Mueller, Bryant Smith, Shane LaHue, Atkins, McKinney, Webster, Gussie, and John Cox.
For me, I have Joseph Webster, Bryant Smith, Tyler Yvette, Logan Parks, Jordan Lee, Will Davis, Justin Hamner, and Wesley Gore.
Well, Hamner was excited. Wesley Gore will be on camera as well. So let's go. We'll go through our 6 camera guys for day one real quick. I always tell you, if we know it by the time we shoot the podcast, we will let you know. We'll obviously have Trey McKinney leading AOY. We'll have Justin Hamner. He was so excited for the event. He's second in points as well. We'll keep an eye on that. We've got Jordan Lee, who would call this probably his home lake, like Gunnersville. He lived on Gunnersville for a while. He's back in the Cullman region. And so Smith would be considered more of a home for him. So you've got McKinney, Hamner, Jay Lee. We got Porosnik, our most recent winner. We got Shane LaHue, and we got Wesley Gore. So we have all mentioned someone that's going to be on camera with us. So there's your 6: McKinney, Lee, Hamner, Gore, Porosnik, LaHue. Boom.
Solid. I'm looking forward to it. That's going to be a good first day, and I think we'll
Yeah,
see
looking
plenty of fish
forward to it.
sketches
I think
there.
you're doing some Bassmaster Live on site, right?
Potentially, yeah, that's what it sounds like. I might be able to hop on with Steve Bowman for the first couple of days during the midday. I don't know, you don't want to call it the midday report, but the 11 to noon window where you guys get a little bit of a breather. I think I might join Steve Bowman if everything goes according to plan. So looking forward to that. It should be fun.
If you're already dialed in on the times, then you're guaranteed you're doing it. Because half the times I'm like, wait, what time are we coming back? And other note, Ed Lochran withdrew from Wheeler. Day one of the tournament, tried to go, had kidney stones, big issue there. We put up a deal, but it was kind of a shock to everyone. So he missed Wheeler. He is going to miss Smith. He's taken a medical hardship, so he will be on the Elite Series next year. But with that, I believe he is having a procedure to try to make the New York swing and fish those last 2, which is what Brad Watley did. When Brad Watley had his medical hardship, he got his treatments, was feeling like himself, and as soon as he could, he resumed action and did Oahe, Mississippi River, and wrapped up the season with us there. So I'd expect the same from Ed, but he will not be here for Smith Lake. So the 1.2% of you who picked him in bucket D, you better be listening. Putting out an APB on that one. We'll try to maybe figure out how to tell you that. We don't want to remove him from the game because he will come back this season, but this event he will not be there. He just
He'll
texted me and
likely
go ahead.
he'll likely be removed, and it's basically a matter of exactly what you were saying, trying to figure out if he was going to be there or not.
Yeah.
But we'll send out an alert, and that comes from Fantasy Fishing to everybody that's selected him.
Oh,
So
good, good.
if they have selected him, they will be alerted. It's kind of one of those deals waiting to see if he was going to fish this one or not. But obviously, once we got confirmation, we'll send out an alert, so they will get alerted. So all good there.
I believe he had some kind of procedure to remove the kidney stones and to correct the issues going on. The kidney stones are gone, he said. So he's supposed to take it easy for a week or two. And then after taking it easy, he'll be back to resume normal activities. They'll monitor him, which is good over that July period. And then August, he'll be back for the northern swing. So keep an eye out for your emails. If you picked him, have somebody ready. If you picked him and drain the lake, just save him for the last two. I already have him he's on my Champlain team because he's great up north. I'd expect him to come back. A little worried how he'll be, but I'm trusting. So, last housekeeping notes. Kyle, winning weight. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
I got 70 pounds, 6 ounces.
Whoa. 70 pounds, 6 ounces. What does that equal out to? 70 divided by 4. 17 and a half a day.
And here's my thought process. So I had way lower than that, and I hope I'm right. But every tournament this year, I've had significantly under what the winning weight ends up being. So I'm going significantly high in hopes that
It meets that. Yeah.
somehow it meets it. I don't think with spotted bass it'll really get up that way. It's just more of a I said it originally like in the mid 60s, and I was like, every time I do this, it ends up being way higher than I thought. So like I'm just gonna go higher,
So you're just
higher
playing
than
mind games. You're playing mind
yeah,
games right now.
100%.
Okay.
It's the same
Okay.
thing every time we talk about century clubs. If we're gonna make it to century clubs, I'll put it 99 point, 99 and 12 ounces or whatever it may be. So I'm just going higher because I'm sick and tired of being under. And I'll probably be over this time, but that's okay. I might change it back to somewhere in the mid 60s because that's kind of what I expect more so. Maybe like 66, 67.
Well, I'm
So
a little lower than that still. 62.2. That's what I've got. 62.2, which is about 15 and a half, 15 and three quarters a day. I think that that's baseline solid. I think that the leader or the winner could end up having close to 20 one day and maybe 13 another day and then 15 and 16 and it'll work its way out around there. So that's what I'm expecting. If they don't hit 20, I could see someone also being uber consistent this week and catching 15 to 16 a day and no slips. And so we'll see how it goes. Awesome. It's been about an hour. We will see you Thursday morning. Bassmaster Live will kick off. And if you're going in person, I've heard all kinds of food trucks, other options, shade, fans. Cullman is showing up big to support the fans that show up in person. So if you're there in attendance, stop by, say hey to Kyle, heckle him while he's on Bass Live Thursday and Friday, and then enjoy the weigh-ins. It'll be a hot one. It should be interesting, and you can only have an Elite Series event on your home lake for the first time, one time. And this is the first time we've been to Smith Lake. So we will see you there. Excited for it. And I love some spotted bass. This is the last opportunity to see spotted bass for the year. We'll see some largemouth as well. I think they had a grand slam from Tyler Williams last week. He caught a largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass, and a meanmouth. He only had 4 fish that day. So that's not ideal, but I don't think we'll see anything other than largemouth, spotted bass this week. We'll deal with the smallmouth in August. See you, Kyle.